The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Redemption Creek, a town that had seen better days before the gold rush moved further west. Eleanor Hayes stood in the shadow of her father's wagon, her worn calico dress clinging to her thin frame in the oppressive heat. At 22, she'd already lived through more disappointment than most women twice her age. "Stand up straight, girl," her father, Josiah Hayes, barked from his perch on the wagon seat. His weathered face showed no emotion as he surveyed the ramshackle buildings lining the street. "Don't want folks thinking you're damaged goods." Eleanor's brother, Samuel, snorted from where he leaned against the wagon wheel. "Bit late for that. Pa, everyone knows she's been passed over by every decent man in 3 counties." The words stung, but Eleanor had grown accustomed to them. Being the plain daughter in a family that valued beauty as currency had taught her to expect little kindness. Her mother had died birthing her, and her father never let her forget that she'd cost him his prettiest possession. "Mickey's expecting us," Josiah said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Said he'd take her off our hands for a fair price." Eleanor's stomach twisted. Mickey O'Brien ran the Broken Wheel Saloon, an establishment where the whiskey was watered and the women were, well, they weren't there to serve drinks. She'd heard the stories, seen the hollow eyes of the girls who worked there. "Pa, please," she said quietly. "I can find work. I can cook, clean." "You've been eating our food for 22 years without bringing in a cent," Samuel interrupted. "Time you earned your keep." They guided her toward the saloon like she was livestock headed to market. The Broken Wheel squatted on the corner like a diseased toad, its painted sign faded and peeling. The stench of stale beer and unwashed bodies wafted through the bat-wing doors. Inside, the afternoon crowd was thin, a few miners nursing warm beers, a card game in the corner. Mickey O'Brien emerged from behind the bar, his greasy hair slicked back, gold tooth glinting when he smiled. "Josiah Hayes," Mickey said, his eyes sliding over Eleanor like she was horseflesh. "This the girl you mentioned?" "That's her," Josiah confirmed. "Strong back, knows her place. She'll do whatever needs doing." Eleanor wanted to run, but where would she go? She had no money, no friends, nowhere to turn. The walls of the saloon seemed to close in around her. "Turn around. Let me get a look at you," Mickey ordered. Eleanor reluctantly turned in a slow circle, feeling like she might vomit. When she faced forward again, a man had entered the saloon. He stood just inside the doorway, dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight around him. Cole Maddox cut an imposing figure even in his trail-worn state. 6 feet of lean muscle and sun-darkened skin, with eyes the color of winter sky. A week's worth of stubble covered his jaw, and his clothes bore the dust of hard travel. The Colt .45 on his hip sat easy, like an old friend. He took in the scene with one sweep of those cold eyes, Mickey's predatory grin, Josiah's calculating look, Samuel's smirk, and Eleanor standing in the middle like a lamb among wolves. "Afternoon," Cole said, his voice like gravel over silk. He moved to the bar with the fluid grace of a man who'd learned to never turn his back on a room. "Whiskey, the real stuff, not that rot gut you usually serve." Mickey's smile faltered slightly. "You got money for the good stuff, stranger." Cole set a gold eagle on the bar. The coin caught the light, drawing every eye in the room. "That'll buy you a whole bottle," Mickey said, reaching for the coin. Cole's hand covered it before Mickey could touch it. "I'm not buying whiskey." The room went still. Eleanor watched, hardly daring to breathe. "Then what?" Mickey started. "The girl," Cole said simply. "I'm buying her freedom." Josiah stepped forward, puffing up like a rooster. "Now see here, mister. This is a family matter. You got no right—" "I've got gold," Cole interrupted. "That gives me all the right I need in a place like this." He looked at Eleanor for the first time, really looked at her. "What's your name?" "Eleanor," she whispered. Then, finding her voice, "Eleanor Hayes." Well, Eleanor Hayes, you want to stay here, or you want to walk out that door? It was the first time anyone had ever asked her what she wanted. The simple question broke something inside her, and she felt tears threaten. I want to leave.
The hell she does,
Samuel snarled, reaching for Eleanor's arm. Cole's hand moved faster than thought, catching Samuel's wrist in an iron grip. Boy, you're about to make a mistake that'll cost you teeth. Samuel tried to pull away, but Cole's grip didn't budge. She's our property. She's a person, Cole said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And where I come from, we stopped trading people a while back. He released Samuel with a slight shove that sent the younger man stumbling. Then he turned back to Mickey and Josiah. 5 gold eagles, that's my offer. Take it and walk away, or don't and wish you had. Mickey licked his lips, greed warring with anger. That's a lot of money for damaged goods. Cole's jaw tightened. That's a lot of money. Period. Yes or no? Josiah grabbed Mickey's arm. Take it. She ain't worth dying over. Because that's what hung in the air now, the promise of violence. Cole hadn't threatened, hadn't blustered. He'd simply stated facts, and every man in that saloon knew he meant every word. Mickey nodded slowly. 5 eagles. Cole set the coins on the bar, never taking his eyes off the men. Eleanor, get your things. I don't have any things, she said quietly. Then we'll get you some. He backed toward the door, gesturing for her to follow. Gentlemen! They stepped out into the blazing sun, and Eleanor blinked, disoriented. Was this real? Had a stranger just bought her freedom? Wait here, Cole said, heading for his horse tied at the hitching post. He returned with a canteen and handed it to her. Drink slow. The water was warm, but clean, and Eleanor hadn't realized how thirsty she was until the first sip. She watched him over the canteen, trying to figure out his angle. Men didn't do things without wanting something in return. Why? She asked when she'd drunk her fill. Cole took the canteen back, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Because I was in the right place at the right time, and I've got gold I won at cards last night. Because I've seen too many women end up in places like that, and it never ends well. What do you want from me? He studied her for a long moment. Nothing. There's a stage comes through day after tomorrow heading east. I'll buy you passage. Give you enough money to start over somewhere. Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in years, anger. Clean, pure anger at the unfairness of it all. So you'll ship me off like cargo, too, just in a different direction. Cole's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm trying to help you. By deciding what's best for me, just like they did. She gestured toward the saloon. Maybe I don't want to go east. Maybe I want to decide for myself where I go. A slow smile spread across Cole's face, transforming his harsh features. Well, I'll be damned. You've got fire in you after all. Eleanor flushed but held his gaze. I've always had fire, just never had anywhere safe to let it burn. Fair enough, Cole said. So what do you want to do? She looked around at the dusty town, then back at him. I want to leave here, today. I want to go somewhere they'll never find me. I'm heading west. Cole offered. California way. It's hard traveling, dangerous too. But you're welcome to ride along until you figure out where you want to be. You trust me. You don't even know me. I know enough, Cole said. I know you'd rather face unknown dangers than known devils. That tells me plenty about your character. Eleanor made her decision. Then I'll go west. Cole nodded and headed back to his horse, a dusty bay gelding that looked like it had seen as many hard miles as its owner. He pulled a spare shirt from his saddlebags and tossed it to her. Put this on over your dress. Sun'll burn you alive out there otherwise. As Eleanor pulled on the oversized shirt, she caught a glimpse of movement in the saloon window. Her father and brother were watching, probably calculating whether 5 gold eagles was worth what they'd lost in future earnings from her misery. They might follow, she said. They might try. Cole agreed, checking his rifle. But men like that are cowards. They prey on the weak. Soon as they realize you're not weak anymore, they'll find easier targets. He offered her a hand up onto the horse. Eleanor had ridden before, but never astride, never in pants borrowed from a stranger's saddlebags that she'd had to roll up 3 times to make fit. "Where are we going?" she asked as he swung up behind her. "First general store. You need proper clothes and supplies. Then we ride until sunset, make camp somewhere defensible. And after that," Cole clicked his tongue, and the horse started forward. "After that, Eleanor Hayes, you start deciding who you want to be." As they rode down the main street of Redemption Creek, Eleanor felt the weight of eyes on them. Let them look, she thought. Let them see Josiah Hayes's worthless daughter riding out of town with her head high. For the first time in her 22 years, Eleanor Hayes was nobody's property. The road ahead was uncertain, possibly dangerous, definitely hard, but it was hers to travel, and that made all the difference. The sun was still brutal, the dust still choking, but somehow it all felt different now. Freedom, Eleanor was learning, changed the very air you breathed. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, golden grass rippling like an ocean under the vast blue dome of sky. 3 days out of Redemption Creek, and Eleanor was beginning to understand what Cole meant by hard traveling. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache, and the borrowed men's clothes chafed despite the soft cotton underthings he'd insisted on buying her at the general store. They'd barely spoken since leaving town. Cole rode behind her on his bay gelding, which he'd finally introduced as Dusty, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Every few hours, he'd call a halt to rest the horse and check their back trail, his pale eyes scanning the horizon with the intensity of a hawk. "No one's following," Eleanor said on the 3rd afternoon, watching him study the landscape. "Not yet," Cole replied, offering her the canteen. "But men like your father don't give up easy when they think they've been cheated. 5 eagles is a lot of money." "I wasn't worth 5 eagles," Eleanor said quietly. Cole's gaze sharpened. "According to who?" "According to everyone who's ever looked at me." She gestured at herself. "I'm plain. I can't have children, the doctor said so after I got sick with fever 2 winters back. No man would pay bride price for a barren woman." "That why your father was selling you to Mickey?" Eleanor nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Said I might as well earn my keep the only way a worthless woman could." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My wife couldn't have children either." The unexpected confession made Eleanor look up. Cole wasn't watching her. His gaze was fixed on something far away, maybe in distance, maybe in time. "Didn't make her worthless," he continued. "Made her Sophie. Made her the woman who laughed at my terrible jokes and sang while she cooked and knew just how I liked my coffee. The woman who could calm a spooked horse with a whisper and who read books by candlelight until her eyes hurt." His voice roughened. "She was worth everything to me. Everything." "Was?" Eleanor asked gently. "Comancheros killed her 5 years ago. Her and about 12 other folks in our settlement while the men were away on a cattle drive." Cole's jaw tightened. "Been hunting bounties ever since. Can't bring her back, but I can make sure men like that pay for their crimes." Eleanor didn't know what to say. She'd lost her mother, but she'd been too young to remember. This was different. This was a wound that still bled. "I'm sorry," she finally offered. "Don't be sorry. Just remember your worth isn't determined by what others think you can give them. It's what you decide for yourself." They mounted up again and continued west. The landscape began to change as they traveled, the flat prairie giving way to rolling hills dotted with scrub oak and mesquite. By evening, they'd reached a small creek lined with cottonwoods. "We'll camp here," Cole announced, swinging down from Dusty. "Good water, shelter, and we can see anyone coming from miles off." Eleanor slid from the saddle, barely suppressing a groan. Cole noticed, of course he did. The man noticed everything and almost smiled.
Gets easier,
He said, "First week's the hardest."
if I survive the first week.
Eleanor muttered, rubbing her sore backside. This time Cole did smile. A quick flash that transformed his weathered face. "You'll survive. You're tougher than you think." They fell into a routine. Cole tended to Dusty while Eleanor gathered kindling for a fire. He'd taught her the basics the first night: how to spot dry wood, how to build the fire small and smokeless. She was a quick learner, he'd said, and the praise had warmed her more than she cared to admit. As she arranged the kindling, Eleanor heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze. Howling, distant but distinct, answered by another call from a different direction.
Wolves,
she breathed when Cole returned. "Coyotes," he corrected, seeming unconcerned. "Wolves sound different, deeper. These are just scavengers calling to each other. They won't bother us if we don't bother them." He showed her how to prepare their simple meal beans and salt pork, hardtack biscuits softened in water. It wasn't fancy, but after a day in the saddle, it tasted like a feast. "You never asked where we're going," Cole observed as they ate. "West, you said California. That's a big place. Anywhere specific you want to go?" Eleanor considered. "Somewhere I can start over. Somewhere nobody knows who I was." "Running from the past doesn't always work," Cole said quietly. "Sometimes it follows you." "Is that what you're doing, running?" "No, I'm hunting. Different thing entirely." He poked at the fire with a stick. "But after 5 years, I'm starting to wonder if there's a difference." They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Eleanor had never seen so many stars. In town, with its lights and smoke, the night sky had seemed small. Out here, it was infinite. "Tell me about California," she said. Cole leaned back against his saddle. "Gold's mostly played out in the easy spots, but there's still opportunity for those willing to work. Towns are growing into cities. San Francisco's got buildings 5 stories tall now. They say Sacramento's becoming civilized schools, churches, even an opera house." "Have you been there?" "Passed through. Tracked a man to Sacramento once. Lost him in the crowds." His expression darkened. "Too many people for my taste, but might suit someone looking to disappear into a new life." Eleanor pulled the blanket he'd given her tighter around her shoulders. "What about you? Where will you go after California?" "Wherever the next bounty takes me, I suppose." "That's no kind of life." Cole's smile was sharp as a blade. "It's the only kind I know anymore." The coyotes howled again, closer this time. Eleanor shivered despite the fire's warmth. Cole noticed he always noticed and stood. "Get some sleep. I'll take first watch." "Watch for what?" "4-legged troubles. 2-legged troubles. Whatever might come calling." He checked his rifle, then settled against a tree where he could see in all directions. "Sleep, Eleanor. You're safe." The strange thing was, she believed him, despite knowing him only 3 days, despite the gun on his hip and the darkness in his past. She felt safer with Cole Maddox than she'd ever felt under her father's roof. Eleanor curled up in her blanket, using the saddle as a pillow like he'd shown her. The ground was hard, the night sounds unsettling, but exhaustion was stronger than discomfort. She woke once in the deep of night. The fire had burned low, just embers glowing in the darkness. Cole was still awake, a shadow against shadows. Keeping watch, the sight of him there, protecting her, expecting nothing in return, brought tears to her eyes. "Go back to sleep," he said softly, somehow knowing she was awake. "Still got hours till dawn." Eleanor closed her eyes, but not before whispering, "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a choice." She didn't see his expression in the darkness, but his voice was rough when he replied. Everyone deserves a choice. Eleanor, everyone deserves to decide their own path. The next morning brought new challenges. Cole taught her how to saddle Dusty, how to check the horse's hooves for stones, how to recognize signs of lameness or illness. "Why are you teaching me this?" Eleanor asked as she struggled with the heavy saddle. "Because you need to know. What happens if something happens to me? You need to be able to take care of yourself." The thought of something happening to him sent an unexpected spike of fear through her. "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Maybe not, but better to be prepared." He adjusted her grip on the saddle. "Life out here doesn't forgive ignorance. The more you know, the better your chances." They encountered their first other travelers that afternoon, a family in a covered wagon heading east. The man driving eyed them suspiciously, his rifle across his knees. The woman beside him stared at Eleanor in her men's clothes with obvious disapproval. "Afternoon," Cole called out pleasantly. The man nodded curtly. "Afternoon. You folks heading west?" "We are. How's the trail ahead?" "Dry. Waterhole about 15 miles on is near empty. Next good water is Miller's Creek. Day-and-a-half ride." The man's eyes narrowed. "You traveling alone, just the two of you?" "Just us," Cole confirmed. "Dangerous country for a man and his woman." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks at the implication, but Cole seemed unperturbed. "Dangerous country regardless. We'll manage." The wagon rolled on, but Eleanor caught the woman looking back at her, expression unreadable. "She thinks I'm your—" Eleanor couldn't finish the sentence. "Let her think what she wants," Cole said. "Her opinion doesn't change anything." But it did. Somehow, Eleanor was acutely aware of propriety, of what was proper and what wasn't. Traveling alone with a man who wasn't her husband, wearing men's clothing, sleeping under the stars. Everything about her current situation would scandalize proper society. "Maybe I should have taken that stagecoach east," she said quietly. Cole turned in the saddle to look at her. "Is that what you want? I can take you to the next town, put you on a stage. You don't have to continue with me if you're uncomfortable." Eleanor thought about it. Thought about arriving in some eastern city with a few coins and no connections, no skills except cooking and cleaning. Thought about the likelihood of ending up exactly where her father had tried to put her, just in a different place. "No," she said firmly. "I chose this path. I'll see it through. Even if people talk. People have been talking about me my whole life. At least now they're talking about my choices, not my failures." Cole nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit." They made camp early that evening by the nearly dry water hole the wagon driver had mentioned. Just a muddy puddle remained. But Cole showed her how to dig a shallow well nearby to find cleaner water, how to strain it through cloth to remove the worst of the sediment. "You know so much," Eleanor observed, watching him work. "Where did you learn it all?" "Army first. Scouted for them during the war. Then from Sophie she grew up on the frontier. Knew things about survival I'd never dreamed of. Rest I learned the hard way, making mistakes and surviving them." "What kind of mistakes?" Cole's smile was rueful. "Trusting the wrong people, not trusting the right ones. Taking shortcuts that turned into disasters. Nearly dying of thirst once because I thought I knew better than an old Apache who warned me about a dry spring. But you survived. So far." He handed her the filled canteen. "Your turn to try." As Eleanor dug her own small well, following his instructions, she realized something had changed. She wasn't just following anymore, she was learning. Each skill Cole taught her was another step toward independence, another choice she could make for herself. That night, as they sat by their small fire, Cole surprised her by pulling a battered book from his saddlebags. "You read?" Eleanor asked, then immediately felt foolish. Of course he could read. "Sophie insisted I learn. Said a man who couldn't read was only half alive." He looked at the book with soft eyes. "This was hers. I've read it so many times I could recite it, but—" he shrugged. What is it? Poetry, Wordsworth. He seemed embarrassed. Not what you'd expect from a bounty hunter, I suppose.
Read some.
Eleanor asked impulsively. Cole looked at her for a long moment, then opened the book to a well-worn page. His voice was different when he read, softer, like he was speaking to ghosts. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. When he finished, they sat in silence.
She would have liked you,
Cole said suddenly.
Sophie.
Yes, she would have admired your courage.
I'm not courageous. I'm terrified most of the time.
Courage isn't the absence of fear, Cole said. It's acting despite the fear. And you, Eleanor Hayes, have been acting despite your fear since the moment you walked out of that saloon. The coyotes were singing again, but Eleanor barely heard them. She was thinking about choices and courage, about the man across the fire who'd shown her both were possible. Cole, she said softly. When we get to California, will you stay for a while? I mean, until I'm settled. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, if that's what you want.
It is,
Eleanor said firmly. That's my choice. And in the flickering firelight, she thought she saw him smile. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Half-built walls of rough-hewn logs stood against the darkening sky. The roof incomplete, gaps between the timbers like missing teeth. Vines had begun to claim one corner, and the door hung askew on leather hinges. Cole pulled Dusty to a halt at the edge of the clearing. He sat perfectly still, but Eleanor could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a forge.
What is this place?
She asked softly. For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Home was supposed to be, anyway. They'd been traveling for over a week now, and Cole had been guiding them steadily northwest instead of due west. Eleanor hadn't questioned it. She trusted his judgment about routes and water sources. Now she understood. This hadn't been a detour. This had been the destination all along. Cole dismounted slowly, as if moving through water. Started building it 6 years ago. Sophie and we'd saved for 2 years to buy the land, 160 acres of good timber, fresh water from the creek, soil rich enough for a garden. He touched one of the logs almost reverently. Cut every one of these myself. Sophie notched them while I cut more. She was better at it than me steadier hands. Eleanor slid down from Dusty, her legs stiff from the long ride. The clearing was beautiful. Despite the abandoned construction, wildflowers had taken over what must have been meant as a garden plot. And the creek Cole mentioned gurgled somewhere nearby.
Why did you stop building?
She asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Got word about a cattle drive needing hands. Good money enough to buy glass windows and a real iron stove like Sophie wanted. His laugh was bitter. Told her I'd only be gone 3 weeks. Longest 3 weeks of my life turned into forever. He walked around the structure, running his hands along the logs, checking joints that had held despite 5 years of weather. Eleanor followed, seeing the care in every cut, every carefully fitted piece. The Comancheros hit while we were gone, Cole continued. 15 men, they said, came at dawn. The settlement didn't stand a chance. He stopped at what would have been the front door. I should have been here. You couldn't have known. I should have been here, he repeated, harder this time. Instead, I was 50 miles away, counting cattle and collecting wages for windows she'd never looked through. Eleanor wanted to comfort him, but didn't know how. What words could ease such guilt instead? She did something else. She picked up a piece of wood from the ground and tested its weight. What are you doing? Cole asked. Looking for usable timber. This place has good bones. Seems a shame to let it rot. Cole stared at her. Eleanor, you said everyone deserves to choose their path. She interrupted. Well, I'm choosing. We need shelter for the night anyway. Might as well make it better shelter. This isn't your burden to carry. No, it's not. It's my choice to make. She met his gaze steadily. You gave me freedom. Cole, this is what I'm doing with it. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Slowly, he bent and picked up another piece of wood. They worked until full darkness made it impossible to continue. Cole showed her how to clear debris safely, how to check the existing structure's stability. They managed to clear most of the inside and patch the worst of the gaps in one corner. By the time they stopped, both were filthy and exhausted. Cole built a fire. In what would have been the hearth, the chimney was solid. At least, they sat on the packed earth floor, eating their simple meal in companionable silence. Tell me about her, Eleanor said eventually. Tell me about Sophie. Cole was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, slowly at first, then with increasing warmth as memories surfaced. Met her in Independence. I was buying supplies for a survey expedition, and she was working in her uncle's general store. Tried to sell me a hat that was 2 sizes too small. He smiled at the memory. When I pointed it out, she said maybe my head was too big and needed shrinking. Eleanor laughed. Sounds like she spoke her mind. Always. Never met anyone like her. She was from back east originally, Philadelphia. Came west after her parents died of cholera. Said she wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Cole's voice softened. Took me 3 months to work up the courage to court her properly. She said later she'd been waiting for 2.5 of those months. How long were you married? 4 years. 4 good years. He stared into the fire. She made everything an adventure, even building this place. We'd work all day. And then she'd read to me by firelight, Shakespeare sometimes, or those penny novels she loved. She did voices for all the characters. Eleanor could picture it a younger Cole, less marked by grief, laughing at his wife's theatrical readings. The image made her heart ache for what he'd lost. She planted rose bushes, Cole continued, gesturing toward the overgrown garden. Said every proper home needed roses. I told her roses were impractical out here. She said that was exactly why we needed them, to remind us that beautiful, impractical things had value too. Did any survive? Cole shrugged. Haven't looked. We should look tomorrow. If they're still there, we should tend them. He turned to study her in the firelight. Why are you doing this? Eleanor, really? Eleanor considered her answer carefully. Because places hold love even after the people are gone. Because something built with that much hope deserves better than abandonment. Because... She paused, then continued more quietly. Because I've never had a home. Not really. And this place, even half-built, feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Cole's expression was unreadable. It's just wood and stone. No, Eleanor said firmly. It's dreams and promises and morning coffee and Shakespeare by firelight. It's every log you cut thinking of her, every notch she carved thinking of the life you'd build. She gestured at the walls around them. This isn't just a cabin. Cole, it's a love letter, and love letters deserve to be finished. He turned away, but not before she saw the glint of moisture in his eyes. They sat in silence while the fire crackled and the night sounds grew around them. Finally, Cole spoke. I have tools cached nearby, wrapped in oilcloth. Buried them before I left. Thought maybe... He shook his head. Foolish to think they'd still be good after 5 years. Only one way to find out. The next morning, they searched for Sophie's roses first. Eleanor found them in the tangled growth, wild now, but alive. Their blooms smaller but still vibrant red. She cleared the weeds around them carefully while Cole watched with an expression she couldn't quite read. The tools were where he'd left them, protected by the oilcloth and a natural overhang of rock. Most were still serviceable axes, saws, hammers, even a precious box of nails. I don't expect, Cole started awkwardly. This isn't why I brought you here. I'm not asking you to—
I know,
Eleanor interrupted.
you're not asking, I'm offering.
They developed a rhythm over the following days. Cole cut timber while Eleanor worked on thinking filling gaps, strengthening joints. He taught her to use the tools properly, patiently correcting her grip, showing her how to let the weight of the hammer do the work. You're a natural, he said on the third day, watching her drive a nail home with 3 efficient strikes.
I have a good teacher,
Eleanor replied, then felt heat rise in her cheeks at the approval in his eyes. They talked while they worked. Eleanor told him about her childhood, the constant feeling of being unwanted, the way her father had looked at her like spoiled goods after the fever left her barren. Cole shared stories of his army days, of meeting Sophie, of the dreams they'd had for this land. Wanted to raise horses, he said, gesturing toward a level area near the creek. Sophie loved horses, said they were more honest than people. She was right, Eleanor agreed, thinking of Dusty's patient strength. What else did you plan? Chickens, maybe a milk cow. Big garden, Sophie wanted to grow everything. Said she'd ken enough vegetables to last through winter. He smiled sadly. She had notebooks full of plans, drew pictures of how everything would look. Do you still have them, the notebooks? Cole shook his head. Burned with everything else. The Comancheros were thorough. Eleanor's heart ached for all those lost dreams, carefully drawn and planned, reduced to ash. Then we'll make new plans, she said firmly. Different, but new. He looked at her strangely. The word had slipped out without thought, but Eleanor didn't take it back. Unless you're planning to leave me here alone once the roof's on.
I wouldn't.
Cole frowned.
I told you I'd see you settled in California.
What if I want to settle here instead? The question hung between them like a physical thing. Cole set down his hammer carefully, his movements very controlled.
Eleanor, this place,
it's full of ghosts.
Everywhere's full of ghosts,
Eleanor replied. At least these are loving ghosts. At least these ghosts built something instead of tearing it down. She thought of all the ghosts she'd left behind her mother who died birthing her, the children she'd never have, the version of herself that had stood silent while her father sold her like cattle. Those ghosts had kept her small, afraid, worthless. These ghosts. Sophie's laughter in the design of the windows. Cole's hope in every carefully placed log. These were different. You don't even know me, Cole said quietly. Not really. I've done things, Eleanor, dark things, necessary things, maybe, but dark all the same. I know enough. Eleanor echoed his words from that first day. I know you're the kind of man who'd spend his gold to save a stranger. I know you're patient and kind and carry poetry in your saddlebags. I know you're teaching me to survive not because you want something from me, but because you think I deserve to know how. She met his eyes. I know you're a good man, Cole Maddox, even if you've forgotten it yourself. He turned away, but not before she saw something raw and vulnerable flash across his face. The cabin needs a roof before the rains come, he said roughly. We should focus on that. Eleanor accepted the deflection, but she smiled as she returned to her work. Cole might not be ready to let go of his ghosts, but she was patient. She'd learned patience in 22 years of waiting for her life to begin. She could wait a little longer. That evening, as they sat by the fire eating beans and biscuits, Cole pulled out a piece of charcoal and a smoothboard.
What are you doing?
Eleanor asked. Drawing plans, he said without looking up. If we're going to put a roof on this place, might as well do it right. Eleanor moved to sit beside him, watching as he sketched. His hands, so capable with weapons and tools, were surprisingly delicate as he drew. Window here, he murmured, to catch morning light. Sophie always loved morning light. He glanced at Eleanor. That all right with you?
It's perfect,
she said softly. They worked on the plans together, Cole drawing and Eleanor suggesting. When she mentioned wanting a space for books, lots of books, a whole shelf, he smiled and added it to the design. "You read?" he asked. "A little. My mother taught me before she died. Father thought it was waste of time for a woman, but I practiced when I could." "We'll get you books," Cole promised. "Many as you want." The casual promise, the assumption of a future where he'd still be around to buy her books, made Eleanor's heart skip. She bent over the plans to hide her expression. "What about here?" she asked, pointing to a corner. "What was this meant to be?" Cole's hand stilled. "Nursery," he said quietly. Sophie was so sure we'd fill it with children. Eleanor covered his hand with hers. "Then we'll make it a library. Fill it with different kind of futures, stories and dreams and adventures." He turned his hand palm up, catching hers. For a moment, they sat frozen, hands clasped, the warmth of connection flowing between them. Then Cole gently pulled away. "Getting late," he said. "Should bank the fire." But that night, as Eleanor lay in her bedroll watching the stars through the gaps in the roof, she held on to the memory of that touch. It wasn't much, just a moment of connection, but it was a beginning. Tomorrow they'd start on the roof. Tomorrow they'd take another step toward making this shell of dreams into something new. And maybe, just maybe, they'd both learn that broken things could be mended, that new dreams could grow where old ones had died. The roses were proof of that, after all. Still blooming, still beautiful, still impractically perfect in the wilderness. Just like hope itself. The sound of horses reached them first, multiple riders moving fast. Too fast for honest travelers on the rough trail. Cole's hand went immediately to his rifle while Eleanor froze, hammer still raised mid-strike. They'd been working on the cabin for nearly 2 weeks now, and the roof was half complete. Eleanor had begun to believe they might actually finish it, might actually build something new from the bones of old dreams, but the approaching hoofbeats shattered that fragile hope like glass. "Inside," Cole ordered, his voice sharp with command. "Now." Eleanor didn't argue. She'd learned to recognize the difference between Cole's teaching voice and his surviving voice. This was definitely the latter. She scrambled through the doorway, Cole right behind her. He positioned himself at the window opening, rifle ready, his body blocking her from view. "How many?" Eleanor whispered. 3, maybe 4. His eyes never left the tree line. "Coming from the east." East, the direction of Redemption Creek, the direction of her past. The riders burst into the clearing moments later, 4 men, dust-covered and hard-faced. Eleanor's heart sank as she recognized the lead rider. Not her father or brother, but something worse, Bill Hartley, her father's sometime partner in various unsavory dealings. Behind him rode 3 men she didn't recognize, all armed, all with the look of those who used violence as casually as others used words. "Well, well," Hartley called out, reining up just outside rifle range. Smart, Eleanor thought with a chill. He knew Cole's reputation. "Cole Maddox, heard you might be heading this way." "Hartley," Cole acknowledged, his rifle never wavering. "You're a long way from home." "Business brings me out. Business concerning stolen property." Hartley's eyes found Eleanor through the window. "Hello there, Ellie. Your daddy's mighty worried about you." "I'm not stolen property," Eleanor said, finding her voice despite her fear. "I'm a free woman." Hartley laughed, an ugly sound. "Free girl. You cost your daddy 5 gold eagles. That's theft in any court in the territory." "Money was paid fair and square," Cole said evenly. "To your friend Mickey O'Brien. Transaction complete." "See, that's where things get complicated." Hartley dismounted, keeping his hands visible but ready. His men spread out slightly, still mounted, creating a loose semicircle. Mickey had no right to sell what wasn't his. Josiah Hayes wants his daughter back, and he's willing to pay for her return. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Cole stated, "That's noble of you, Maddox, real noble. But nobility doesn't stop bullets, does it?" Hartley's hand drifted toward his gun. "4 of us, 1 of you. Maybe you get 1 or 2 of us, but you can't get all 4. And then what happens to sweet little Ellie?" Eleanor felt rage build in her chest clean, pure rage that burned away the fear. Before Cole could respond, she stepped out from behind him, ignoring his hiss of warning. "What happens," she said clearly, "is I put a bullet in whoever's left standing." She held the pistol Cole had been teaching her to use, had insisted she carry steady despite her shaking hands. The surprise on Hartley's face was almost worth the risk. "You gave her a gun?" Hartley asked Cole incredulously. "You armed a woman." "I armed a person," Cole corrected. "A person who can make her own choices." "This is ridiculous," one of Hartley's men muttered. "Just rush them. What's one woman with a pistol going to—" The shot was impossibly loud in the clearing. Eleanor's bullet kicked up dirt inches from the speaker's horse, causing the animal to rear and dump its rider in the dust. She'd aimed for exactly that spot, just as Cole had taught her. "The next one won't miss," she said calmly, though her heart was racing. "I may be just a woman, Mr. Hartley, but I can count 4 of you, 2 of us. Cole takes 2 before you clear leather, he's that fast, and I take 1. That leaves 1 of you standing, and I bet each of you thinks it'll be him. But only 1 of you will be right, and the others will be dead." She cocked the pistol again. "So, who wants to bet their life that they're the lucky one?" The fallen rider scrambled to his feet. Looking between Hartley and the cabin, the other 2 mounted men shifted uneasily. Hartley's face had gone red with fury. "Your father said you were trouble. Said you'd got above yourself. Needed breaking." "My father," Eleanor interrupted, "is a coward who sells what he can't control. And you, Mr. Hartley, are a bigger coward for doing his dirty work." She took a step forward, and was gratified to see Hartley take a small step back. "I'm done being cargo, done being property, done being silent." "This ain't over," Hartley snarled. "Josiah Hayes don't forget debts." "Then let me make this crystal clear," Eleanor said. "I'm not for sale. Not anymore. Not ever again. And if my father wants me back, he can come himself instead of sending his dogs to fetch me." Cole moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "You heard the lady. Time to move on." Hartley looked between them, calculating. Whatever he saw in their faces, determination, unity, willingness to die rather than yield made his decision. "Mount up." He ordered his men. As they prepared to leave, he turned back. "This ain't finished, girl, and your daddy's got rights." "My daddy," Eleanor said firmly, "has nothing. No rights to me. No claim on my future. No say in my choices. Tell him I said that. Tell him Eleanor Hayes died in Redemption Creek, and someone new was born. Someone who won't be bought, sold, or broken by the likes of him." Hartley spat in the dust, but said nothing more. The 4 men rode out the way they'd come, and Eleanor didn't lower her pistol until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then her knees gave out. Cole caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently to sit on the cabin's doorstep. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't holster the pistol. He took it from her gently, safetying it before tucking it away. "You did good," he said quietly. "Real good. I thought I was going to be sick," Eleanor confessed. "When I saw them, all I could think was that they'd drag me back, that everything would go back to how it was." "Hey." Cole knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders. "Look at me." She met his eyes, surprised by the fierce pride she saw there. "You just faced down 4 armed men and sent them running. You stood your ground and claimed your life." His thumbs rubbed gentle circles on her shoulders. "Eleanor Hayes might have died in Redemption Creek, but whoever was born there, she's magnificent." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear or relief, but from the overwhelming realization that he saw her, really saw her, not as damaged goods or property or a burden, but as someone worthy of admiration.
"They'll be back," she said when she could speak past the lump in her throat. "My father won't give up that easily."
Maybe, Cole agreed, helping her to her feet. But they'll think twice about coming at you direct. You put fear in them today. That matters. They went back to work on the cabin, but the day's rhythm was broken. Every sound from the forest made them tense. Every bird call could be a signal. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Cole made a decision. "Pack up. We're moving to defensive positions for the night." He led her to a spot he'd scouted earlier, a cluster of rocks with good sight lines and natural cover. They made a cold camp. No fire to give away their position. Eleanor had never felt more exposed, sitting in the darkness with only the stars for light. "Tell me about your father," Cole said quietly. "Why's he so determined to get you back? 5 eagles is good money, but not enough to hire 4 guns and send them this far." Eleanor wrapped her arms around her knees.
"It's not about the money. Never was. It's about control." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My father, he builds his worth on what he owns. Land, cattle, children. When my mother died birthing me, he lost his most prized possession. I was supposed to make up for that marry well, bring him connections, grandchildren to carry on his name.
"But you couldn't."
But I couldn't," Eleanor confirmed. "The fever took that possibility. So I became worthless to him, except as something to sell. And when you bought my freedom..." She shook her head. "You didn't just take his property. You took his ability to control my story. That's what he can't forgive." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "My father was the same way. Different circumstances, but same need to control. Beat me and my brother regular, trying to make us into what he thought men should be. When I joined the army at 16, he said I was dead to him." He smiled grimly. "Best thing he ever did for me." Do you ever wonder what makes them that way? What breaks inside a person to make them need to break others? Used to. Then I realized it didn't matter. Understanding why someone's cruel doesn't make the cruelty hurt less. He shifted to face her more fully. What matters is what we do despite them. Who we choose to become when they're not controlling the choices. And who are you choosing to become? Cole Maddox. He looked at her for a long time in the starlight. I used to think I'd chosen already. Bounty hunter, widower, man defined by what he'd lost. He gestured toward the half-built cabin below them. But maybe we get more than one chance to choose. Eleanor's heart beat faster. Maybe we do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night, sharing the vigil. Eventually, Eleanor dozed against Cole's shoulder, trusting him to keep watch. She woke once to find he'd covered her with his coat, and his hand rested protectively on her shoulder. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Cole touched her arm. Look! Below them, the cabin sat peaceful in the morning light. Their cabin, Eleanor realized. Not just his memorial to Sophie anymore, but something new, something theirs. No sign of visitors. Cole reported, but we should assume they're watching. Your father will want to know what we're doing, where we're going. Then let's show him, Eleanor said with sudden determination. Let's finish that roof. Let's plant a garden. Let's build something so solid, so real, that he has to accept I'm never coming back. Cole smiled, the expression transforming his weather-worn features. You sure it'll be dangerous? He might escalate. I'm sure. Eleanor stood, brushing dust from her clothes. I meant what I said yesterday. Eleanor Hayes is dead, but whoever I am now, she's not running anymore. She's building. They returned to the cabin with renewed purpose. As Eleanor picked up her hammer,
She thought about the courage it took to stay rather than run, to build rather than hide. Her father had taught her she was worthless, but every nail she drove, every board she placed, said otherwise. When Cole began humming while he worked an old army tune she'd heard him sing before Eleanor knew they'd crossed some invisible line. They weren't just building a shelter anymore. They were building a statement, a declaration, a home. And if Bill Hartley or her father or anyone else wanted to challenge that, well, she had a pistol on her hip and a partner at her side. She'd found her voice and her courage in equal measure. Let them come. She wasn't the same frightened girl they'd tried to sell in Redemption Creek. That girl really had died. And in her place stood someone entirely new. Someone who could face down 4 armed men. Someone who could build a home from ruins. Someone who was finally, truly, magnificently free. The first snow came early that year, catching them with the roof barely finished and gaps still showing between the logs. Eleanor woke to Cole's violent shivering beside the dying fire, his face flushed with fever despite the cold. "Just a chill," he muttered when she pressed her hand to his burning forehead. "Be fine by morning." But he wasn't fine. By noon, he was delirious, calling for Sophie, reaching for phantoms only he could see. Eleanor had never felt more helpless or more terrified. The nearest town was 2 days' ride, and she couldn't leave him alone that long. "Stay with me, Cole," she whispered, bathing his face with cool water from the creek. "You don't get to leave me now, not after teaching me to be brave." She'd seen her mother tend fevers before she died, remembered fragments of herb lore and common sense. Willow bark tea for the fever, if she could find any. Keep him warm, but not too warm. Force water down his throat even when he fought her. The willow trees by the creek were easier to find than she'd feared. Eleanor hacked at the bark with shaking hands, trying to remember the proportions. Too little wouldn't help, too much could be dangerous. She boiled it strong, hoping for the best. Getting it down Cole's throat was another battle. He thrashed and mumbled, lost in fever dreams. Once, he gripped her wrist hard enough to bruise, his eyes wild and unseeing. "Sophie, don't go," he pleaded. "I'll build it faster, I promise. Just don't go." "I'm here," Eleanor soothed, not correcting him. "I'm not going anywhere." The first night was the worst. The snow fell steadily, seeping through the gaps they hadn't finished filling. Eleanor dragged Cole closer to the fire, piling every blanket they had on top of him. She kept the flames fed, venturing out into the swirling snow for more wood whenever the pile grew low. Sometime near dawn, exhausted and half-frozen, she crawled under the blankets with him. Propriety be damned, they'd both die if she couldn't keep him warm. His body radiated heat like a furnace, but he still shivered convulsively. "Please," she whispered against his shoulder. "Please don't leave me alone out here. I'm not brave enough without you." As if in response, his arm came around her, pulling her closer. For a moment, she thought he'd woken, but his eyes remained closed, his breathing rough and labored. The second day brought new challenges. Cole's fever broke briefly, leaving him lucid but weak as a newborn colt. He tried to sit up, saw their compromised position, and immediately tried to pull away. "Don't," Eleanor said firmly, pushing him back down. "You'll freeze, and then where will I be?" "Not proper," he managed through chattering teeth. "Nothing about our situation is proper," Eleanor reminded him. "I'm wearing men's clothes in a half-built cabin in the middle of nowhere, nursing a bounty hunter through a fever. I think we've moved past proper." He might have smiled, it was hard to tell through the fevered flush. "Practical woman." "You taught me to be practical." She pressed another cup of willow bark tea to his lips. "Now drink this and stop talking. You need your strength." By evening, the fever had returned with vengeance. Cole tossed and turned, sometimes calling for Sophie, sometimes for men whose names Eleanor didn't recognize, fellow soldiers. Perhaps, or bounties he'd hunted, once, terrifyingly. He spoke to his father. "Not weak," he insisted to the phantom. "Not weak. I'll show you. I'll show all of you." Eleanor held his hand through it all, talking when he seemed to need voices, silent when he needed peace. She told him about her childhood, about the books she'd snuck reads of when her father wasn't looking. She recited what poetry she could remember, sang the few songs her mother had taught her before dying. On the third night, with the snow still falling and their wood running dangerously low, Eleanor made a desperate decision. She couldn't leave Cole to get more firewood from the forest. The pile near the cabin was depleted, but there was wood already cut, already shaped the logs meant for finishing the cabin walls. "Sorry, Sophie," she whispered as she pried loose a log from the pile, "but I think you'd understand. The living matter more than perfect walls." She burned their building materials through that long night, each log buying them a few more hours of warmth. Cole's fever raged and broke and raged again, leaving him drenched and shaking. Eleanor changed his sweat-soaked clothes with clinical efficiency. Past embarrassment now. Survival was all that mattered. Sometime before dawn on the fourth day, she dozed off beside him, exhausted beyond measure. She woke to weak sunlight filtering through the gaps in the walls and Cole's eyes clear and aware watching her. "Eleanor," his voice was hoarse but lucid. "You're awake." She sat up quickly, checking his forehead. "Cool. Blessedly cool. The fever's broken." He tried to sit up, winced, and settled back. "How long?" "3 days. Nearly 4. She helped him sip water. "You scared me. Cole Maddox, don't do it again." His eyes took in the depleted wood pile, the gaps in the cabin walls where she'd removed logs, her exhausted face. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. Where else would I go?" "Town. Safety. Anywhere but trapped in a snowstorm with a dying man." "You weren't dying," Eleanor said fiercely. "I wouldn't let you." Something shifted in his expression. He raised one trembling hand to her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "My brave girl." The words, soft and wondering, broke something inside Eleanor. All the fear and exhaustion of the past days crashed over her, and she found herself crying great, gulping sobs that shook her whole body. "Hey." Cole struggled upright despite her protests, gathering her against him. "Hey, it's all right. I'm all right. I thought I'd lost you," she managed between sobs. "I thought I'd be alone again, and I couldn't, I can't." "Shh." He stroked her hair, his touch gentle despite his weakness. "You're not alone. Not anymore. Neither of us is." They sat like that while Eleanor's storm of tears passed and the morning sun grew stronger. Finally, she pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. "You burned the cabin logs," Cole observed, no accusation in his tone. "I burned some of them," Eleanor corrected. "We can cut more. We can't cut more of you." He was quiet for a moment. "Sophie would have done the same thing. Practical women, both of you." It was the first time he'd compared her to Sophie without pain shadowing his features. Eleanor felt something ease in her chest. "You need food," she said, changing the subject. "Broth first, then something solid if you can keep it down." She set about making a simple soup from their dried provisions, aware of Cole watching her every move. There was something different in his gaze now, something that hadn't been there before the fever, as if those 3 days of delirium had stripped away some final barrier between them. "You called for her," Eleanor said quietly as she stirred the pot. "For Sophie." "I remember some of it, like dreams, but more real." He paused. "Did I say anything else?" "You spoke to your father, told him you weren't weak." Cole's jaw tightened. "He'd been dead 10 years, but still haunts my fevers." "You're not weak," Eleanor said firmly. "You're one of the strongest men I've ever known. Strong men don't get laid low by a chill. Strong men survive getting laid low by a chill because strong women take care of them.
Eleanor countered. Strength isn't about never falling. Cole, it's about getting back up and letting others help you when you need it. She brought him the soup, helping him hold the cup when his hands shook. He managed half before exhaustion overtook him again. This time, his sleep was natural, healing. Eleanor spent the day tending him and assessing their situation. The storm had passed, leaving everything buried under 2 feet of snow. They'd need more firewood soon, and their food supplies were running low. But Cole was alive and improving. Everything else could be managed. By evening, he was able to sit up on his own and eat solid food. Color was returning to his face, though he was still weak as a kitten. "We make a good team," he said suddenly as Eleanor added wood to the fire, proper firewood she'd managed to dig out from under the snow. "We do," she agreed. "I mean it, Eleanor. What you did these past days, not many would have managed it. You saved my life." "You saved mine first," she reminded him. "Seems fair to return the favor." "That's not—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm trying to say something, and I'm making a mess of it." Eleanor moved to sit beside him. "Then just say it." "When I was fevered, I saw things, memories, dreams, all mixed together. Sophie was there, but so were you. And she said—" He paused, struggling with the words. "She said it was all right, said she brought me here to build something. And maybe it wasn't the life we planned, but it could still be good, still be worth having." Eleanor's breath caught. "Cole, I'm not saying I'm ready for a don't know what I'm ready for," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to lose you. When I woke up and saw you there, saw what you'd sacrificed to keep me alive, I knew I couldn't go back to being alone. Don't want to." "You don't have to," Eleanor said softly. "We can figure out the rest as we go. For now, let's just survive the winter. Together." He caught her hand, squeezed it gently. Together. Outside, the snow began falling again. But inside the cabin, their cabin warmth held the cold at bay. They'd lost days of work and burned precious materials, but they'd gained something more valuable. Understanding, partnership, the beginning of something that might, someday, be called love. For now, Eleanor thought as she watched the firelight play across Cole's recovering features. It was enough to not be alone, enough to have someone worth fighting for, someone who would fight for her in return. The winter would be long and hard. They'd face hunger and cold and probably more visits from her father's men. But they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. She'd learned to be brave in these past weeks. Now, perhaps, she was learning something even more valuable, how to let someone else be brave for her when she needed it. How to trust, how to stay, how to build something worth having from the ashes of what was lost. The cabin walls might have gaps, but their foundation, the thing they were building together, had proven stronger than fever, stronger than fear. Strong enough to last through whatever winter might bring. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, promising another storm before morning. They'd weathered 3 months of winter together, each blizzard drawing them closer, each shared hardship building trust deeper than words. Eleanor sat near the fire, mending one of Cole's shirts by lamplight. He watched her from across the room, pretending to clean his rifle, though he'd already cleaned it twice. The domesticity of the scene struck him so different from the lonely years he'd spent hunting men across the territory, yet somehow feeling more right than anything had since Sophie's death. "You keep staring. It'll be dawn before you finish with that gun," Eleanor said without looking up. "Maybe I like the view better than gun cleaning." She glanced at him then, color rising in her cheeks. 3 months of close quarters had worn away much of her initial shyness, but moments like this, when he looked at her with heat in his eyes, still made her breath catch. "Cole," she began, then stopped, setting aside her mending. "What is it?" She stood, moving to the window to peer out at the swirling snow.
The tension that had been building between them for weeks seemed to thicken the air. Every accidental touch, every shared glance, every night spent sleeping on opposite sides of the fire had led to this moment. "Sometimes I dream about spring," she said quietly. "About what happens when the snow melts and the pass is clear, when you could leave if you wanted. Is that what you think, that I'm waiting for spring to ride off?" "Aren't you?" She turned to face him. "Your life is out there, hunting bounties, moving from town to town. This," she gestured at the cabin, "this was supposed to be temporary, until I figured out where to go." Cole set down his rifle and stood, crossing to her in 3 strides. "Eleanor, look at me." She did, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. "My life was out there," he said carefully. "Past tense, somewhere between Redemption Creek and that fever, things changed." He cupped her face gently. "You changed them." "I'm not Sophie," Eleanor whispered. "I can't give you children, can't give you the life you planned. I buried those plans with her." Cole interrupted. "What I'm talking about is something new, something we choose, not something we're trying to recreate." Eleanor's hands came up to cover his. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when spring comes, I want to plant a garden with you. Want to finish these walls proper? Want to—" He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easy after years of silence. "Want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you choose to stay." "Cole!" Eleanor's voice broke on his name. "I know I'm not much of a bargain," he continued. "Got more ghosts than any man should carry. Got blood on my hands that won't wash clean. But Eleanor, these past months with you, they've been the closest thing to peace I've known in 5 years." She pulled his hands from her face, holding them between hers. His palms were calloused, scarred from work and weather and violence, but they'd been nothing but gentle with her. "You saved me," she said simply. "Not just from my father, but from believing I was worthless. You taught me I could be strong. You were always strong, just needed the chance to show it." Eleanor took a shaky breath. "In the saloon that day, when you asked me what I wanted, no one had ever asked me that before. And now you're asking me again. Aren't you what I want, what I choose?" "I am." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd become her salvation and her strength, who'd taught her to shoot and build and survive, who'd held her through nightmares and laughed at her terrible cooking attempts, and never once made her feel like the burden her father had always claimed she was. "I choose you," she said clearly. "I choose this cabin and this life and whatever comes with it. I choose—" He kissed her before she could finish, a desperate press of lips that spoke of months of restraint finally breaking. Eleanor made a soft sound and melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. "Eleanor," he groaned against her mouth. "Are you sure, once we cross this line?" "I'm sure," she breathed. "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled back slightly, searching her face. "Tell me what you want. Your choice, your words." Eleanor felt heat flood her cheeks, but she held his gaze. This was Cole, who'd seen her at her worst and still thought she was magnificent, who'd given her choices when everyone else had tried to take them away. "I want you to make me yours," she whispered, then, finding courage in his eyes, added more boldly, "I want to belong to someone by choice, not by force. I want to give myself to someone who sees me as more than property." Cole's expression darkened with desire, but he held himself still. "Eleanor, you already belong to yourself. That's what I've been trying to teach you. You don't need to belong to anyone else." "I know," she said, touching his face. "That's why I can choose to share myself with you, because I belong to me first." Something shifted in his expression, wonder, perhaps, or recognition. "My brave, brilliant girl," he murmured. "You understand better than I ever did." "Then stop talking," Eleanor said, surprising herself with her boldness. "And show me what it means to be wanted, really wanted.
Not as property or a burden, but as a woman, as myself. Cole studied her for another heartbeat, then lifted her into his arms. Eleanor gasped, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I'll be gentle," he promised, carrying her toward the bed they'd built in the corner. "Gentle," Eleanor whispered, remembering all the times gentleness had been another word for pity, for handling the fragile, worthless girl with care so she wouldn't break and become even more useless. She pressed her lips close to his ear. "No, I don't need gentle. I need real. I need you to touch me like I matter." Cole set her on her feet beside the bed, his hands framing her face. "You do matter, more than you know." "Then show me," Eleanor challenged. "Show me like you mean it, like you're not afraid I'll shatter." Fire flared in Cole's eyes. "Is that what you want, for me to prove you're not some delicate thing that needs protecting?" "Yes," Eleanor breathed. "I've been handled with kid gloves my whole life, treated like cracked china. I want to feel alive, want to feel chosen, want—" "What?" His voice had dropped to a rumble that made her shiver. "Tell me exactly what you want. Eleanor, your words, your choice." She gathered all her courage, all the strength he'd helped her find. "I want you to claim me, not own me, but claim me. There's a difference." "Yes," Cole agreed roughly. "There is." His hands went to the buttons of her shirt, his shirt, really, that she'd taken to wearing. "Still your choice, always your choice. You say stop. We stop." "I won't say stop. But you could. That's what matters." He pushed the shirt off her shoulders. "That's what makes this different from anything your father or anyone else ever tried to take from you. You have the power here, Eleanor, always." She understood then what he was giving her, not just passion, but control. The ability to choose not just whether, but how. It was a gift greater than any gentleness. "Then I choose this," she said clearly. "I choose you, all of you, Cole, even the parts that aren't gentle." He kissed her again, harder this time, and Eleanor felt something wild and free rise up in her chest. This was what she'd wanted to be desired, not despite her strength, but because of it. To be met as an equal, not handled like something broken. Later, as they lay entwined before the dying fire, Cole traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Eleanor had never felt so completely at peace, so utterly certain of her place in the world. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None. You—" "Only that it took us so long to get here." Eleanor smiled against his chest. "We had to build the foundation first. Trust, choice, understanding." She lifted her head to look at him. "Sophie was a lucky woman, to be loved by you. I was the lucky one," Cole corrected. "And now," he cupped her face gently, "now I'm lucky again. Lightning striking twice in one lifetime." "Is that what this is?" "What else would you call it, this thing between us that grew from transaction to partnership to—" He paused. "To what?" Eleanor prompted, though her heart already knew the answer. "To love," Cole said simply. "Different from before, built on different ground, but love all the same." Eleanor kissed him softly. "I love you too. Not because you saved me, but because you helped me save myself, because you saw me as a person when everyone else saw property." "You were never property," Cole said fiercely. "Never." "I know that now. You taught me." She settled back against his chest. "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we wake up together. We work on the cabin. We live our life." His arms tightened around her. "Spring will come, and we'll plant that garden. Summer will bring its own challenges, but we'll face them together." "And your bounty hunting—" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Maybe it's time to let that go too. Can't build a life always looking over my shoulder, always riding off after the next man. Besides," he pressed a kiss to her hair, I've got better things to defend now than other people's justice.
Like what? Like you. Like this home we're building. Like the life we're choosing. He shifted to look down at her. That enough for you, a half-reformed bounty hunter trying to be a farmer? You're enough, Eleanor said firmly. Whatever you choose to be, you're enough. They fell asleep as the storm raged outside, safe in their shelter, warm in their choice. Eleanor's last thought before dreams claimed her was that her father had been right about one thing she had been meant to be claimed. He just hadn't understood that being claimed by choice, with love and respect and passion, was nothing like being owned. One was freedom, the other was a cage. And Eleanor Hayes, or whoever she was becoming, would never be caged again. The riders came with the spring thaw, when the mountain passes cleared and the creek ran high with snowmelt. Eleanor saw the dust cloud first from where she knelt in the garden, planting the seeds they'd bought from a traveling merchant the week before. "Cole!" she called, her voice steady despite the fear that clenched her stomach. He emerged from the cabin instantly, rifle in hand, reading the tension in her posture, following her gaze. He counted the riders 8 this time, maybe more. Too many for her father's usual hired guns. "Inside," he ordered, but Eleanor was already moving, grabbing the shotgun from beside the door. "That's not my father's men," she said, peering through the window. "Look at their clothes. Too fine for hired thugs." Cole's expression darkened as he recognized the lead rider. "Harrison Blake, mining company man. Owns half the territory's gold interests." "What does he want with us?" "Not us. The land. This creek feeds into the richest placer deposits in 50 miles. I've seen his type before they come with papers and promises. Then bullets if those don't work." The riders reined up just outside what Eleanor had come to think of as their yard, the cleared space between the cabin and the garden. Blake dismounted with the careful movements of a man who spent more time behind a desk than in the saddle. He was perhaps 40, well-dressed, with cold eyes that surveyed their homestead like he was calculating its price. "Mr. Maddox," Blake called out. "I'd appreciate a word." Cole stepped onto the porch, rifle casual in his hands but ready. Eleanor followed, shotgun prominent. "Say your piece from there," Cole responded. Blake's smile was practiced, empty. "Now, is that any way to greet a neighbor? I've come with a business proposition that could benefit us all. We're not interested in selling." "You haven't heard my offer." Blake pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I've done some research. Mr. Maddox, this land was abandoned for 5 years. By territorial law. That makes it open for claim. I've filed the proper papers." Eleanor felt rage build in her chest. "This is Cole's land. He bought it fair and square." Blake's eyes slid to her dismissively. "I wasn't aware you'd remarried. Maddox, though I must say, your taste has simplified since your first wife." Cole's knuckles went white on the rifle. "Choose your next words very carefully, Blake." "I meant no offense," Blake said smoothly, though his smirk suggested otherwise. "I'm simply trying to conduct business. The fact is, my claim supersedes any informal arrangement you might have had. However, I'm willing to be generous. $500 for you to vacate peacefully." "The answer is no." "700. The answer will always be no." Blake's friendly mask slipped slightly. "Mr. Maddox, you're a practical man, a former bounty hunter. I believe you understand how the world works. The strong take what they want, and the weak, well, they adapt or they perish." "Is that a threat?" Eleanor stepped forward, shotgun rising. "It's a observation. Mrs. Maddox," Eleanor said clearly, feeling Cole's quick glance but not backing down. "And this is our land." Blake's eyebrows rose. "Mrs. Maddox, how interesting. I wonder if that's actually legal."
given that the records show Cole Maddox as still married to one Sophie Maddox, deceased, unless you have documentation proving otherwise. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. The lady said this is their land. That should be enough for any gentleman. A grizzled man on a gray horse had approached from the tree line Tom Garrett, the old trapper who occasionally traded with them, behind him. Eleanor was shocked to see others emerging, the widow Martinez with her 2 grown sons, Jacob, the freed slave who was building a homestead 2 valleys over, even the traveling merchant who'd sold them seeds. "This isn't your concern, old man," Blake said coldly. "See, that's where you're wrong." Tom spat tobacco juice near Blake's fancy boots. "What concerns one of us concerns all of us. We've been watching you and your kind push folks off their land all up and down the territory. Not happening here." "You people don't understand," Blake began. "We understand plenty," the widow Martinez interrupted, her English heavily accented but clear. "We understand that Senor Maddox and his woman help us when we need. When my cow was sick, they shared their milk. When Jacob needed help with his roof, they came. When those bandits tried to rob me last month," the merchant added, "it was Maddox who tracked them down and returned my goods. Man builds community like that. He's got roots here, papers or no papers." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't realized how their small acts of kindness had built connections, created a community where none had existed before. Blake's face had gone red. "This is not how business is conducted. I have legal—" "Your legal papers mean nothing if you're not alive to file them," Cole said quietly, and the threat in his voice was unmistakable. "And right now, you're outnumbered and outgunned on land you're trying to steal. I'd reconsider my position if I were you." Blake looked around at the assembled neighbors, all armed, all watching him with hostile eyes. His own men shifted nervously in their saddles. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll be back with the territorial marshal, with proper authority." "You do that," Tom Garrett said cheerfully. "Marshal Thompson's a good man, honest. Be real interested to hear about all those claims you filed on lands where folks mysteriously disappeared or died." Blake went pale. Without another word, he mounted and spurred his horse away, his men following hastily. As the dust settled, Eleanor lowered her shotgun with shaking hands. "They'll be back." "Yes," Cole agreed. "But not today. And when they do come, we'll be ready." He looked at their assembled neighbors. "Thank you, all of you." "No need for thanks," Jacob said quietly. "You showed me respect when most whites wouldn't. That's worth more than gold claims. You helped me bury my husband with dignity," the widow Martinez added. "My sons and I, we remember." One by one, the others shared their stories, small kindnesses Cole and Eleanor had shown, connections forged through shared hardship and mutual aid. Eleanor hadn't realized they'd been building more than a cabin. They'd been building a community. After the neighbors departed with promises to stay alert and spread the word about Blake's threats, Cole and Eleanor stood alone in their yard. The garden she'd been planting seemed both more precious and more fragile now. "Mrs. Maddox?" Cole asked with a slight smile. Eleanor blushed. It seemed simpler than explaining, and she looked up at him. It didn't feel like a lie. Not really. Cole set down his rifle and pulled her close. "No, it didn't." He was quiet for a moment. "We could make it official. There's a circuit preacher comes through Miller's Creek every few months." "Is that a proposal?" "Cole Maddox. It's a question. Your choice, as always." He pulled back to look at her. "I know papers don't make a marriage. What we have, what we've built, that's what matters. But if Blake's going to use law against us, might be good to have law on our side too." Eleanor considered. Marriage to Cole wouldn't be like what her father had planned a transaction, a transfer of property. It would be a partnership, freely chosen. "Yes," she said simply. But not because of Blake or anyone else. Because I want to. Because choosing you every day isn't enough anymore. I want to choose you for always.
Cole kissed her, long and deep, there in the yard where their neighbors had stood defending them, when they finally broke apart. He rested his forehead against hers. "We need to prepare," he said. "Blake won't give up easy. Men like him never do."
"Then we'll fight,"
Eleanor said fiercely.
"We've built too much to let him take it."
"We'll need more than guns. Need to be smart about this. I still have some contacts from my bounty hunting days, men who might know things about Blake he'd rather keep quiet." Eleanor smiled. "The hunter becomes the hunted." "Something like that. But this time, I'm not hunting for money or vengeance. I'm hunting to protect what's mine, what's ours." They spent the rest of the day planning, preparing. Eleanor cleaned and loaded every weapon they had while Cole wrote letters to old contacts. As night fell, they stood together on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "Are you afraid?" Cole asked.
"Yes,"
Eleanor admitted.
"but not like before. Not the helpless fear I lived with for so long. This is different. This is—"
She searched for words.
"This is the fear of someone with something to lose, something worth fighting for."
"That's the most dangerous kind of person," Cole said. "Someone with something to protect. Blake has no idea what he started." Eleanor leaned into his warmth. "Remember what you told me that first day? That men like my father prey on the weak, but back off when they realize you're not weak anymore."
"I remember."
"Blake thinks we're weak, isolated, easy targets." She smiled, thinking of their neighbors' fierce faces. "He's about to learn different." "My fierce warrior," Cole murmured into her hair. "What happened to the scared girl in the saloon?" "She grew up," Eleanor said simply. "She found her home and her people and her strength. She became who she was meant to be." "And who's that?" Eleanor turned in his arms, meeting his eyes in the starlight. "Eleanor Maddox, gardener, builder, fighter, partner to the finest man in the territory." She grinned. "Terrible cook, but excellent shot. Woman who chooses her own path and defends it with everything she has." "I love you," Cole said, the words still new enough to make Eleanor's heart race.
"I love you too. And tomorrow,
we start fighting to keep what we love. Together. Always together." As they went inside, Eleanor paused to look back at their land, the garden just beginning to sprout, the cabin solid despite its patches, the roses blooming wild and beautiful by the door. It was worth fighting for. All of it. Blake could come with his papers and his threats. He'd find more than he bargained for. He'd find a community forged in kindness and strengthened by shared purpose. He'd find a couple who'd already survived everything the frontier could throw at them. Most of all, he'd find that Eleanor Hayes quiet, worthless Eleanor Hayes who'd been sold like cattle was truly dead. In her place stood Eleanor Maddox, and she was magnificent in her fury.
"Let them come." She was ready.
The morning of the confrontation dawned clear and bright, birds singing in the pines as if unaware of the tension crackling through the valley. Eleanor stood at the window, watching the road while her hands automatically checked the loads in her pistol. 3 weeks had passed since Blake's first visit. 3 weeks of preparation and waiting. "They're coming," she said quietly. Cole looked up from the letter he'd been reading, the last of several responses from old contacts. His expression was grim, but satisfied. "How many?" 15, maybe 20. Blake brought an army.
"He brought witnesses,"
Cole corrected, folding the letter carefully. "Men who'll spread the word about what happens here today." Eleanor turned from the window.
"You found something in your letters."
Blake made his fortune in California during the rush, but not from gold. Cole's smile was sharp. From selling claims to mines that didn't exist. Forged assay reports. 3 men died when a shaft he swore was stable collapsed. He changed his name, came here, started over. But you have proof. Affidavits, witnesses, enough to ruin him if it comes to court. He stood, checking his own weapons. But men like Blake rarely let things get to court. The sound of horses grew louder. Eleanor took her position at the east window while Cole covered the west, but as the riders crested the hill, she gasped in surprise. "Cole, look!" Behind Blake's group, more riders appeared. Tom Garrett led them, but the crowd had grown not just their immediate neighbors, but homesteaders from throughout the valley, the Johnsons with their 6 grown sons, the German families from upstream, even Marshal Thompson himself, his badge glinting in the morning sun. Blake reined up in the yard, his confidence visibly shaken by the unexpected crowd. He'd brought gunmen. Cole and Eleanor had brought community. "Maddox," Blake called out. "I've brought legal papers. Proper eviction notice signed by a territorial judge." "You? Which judge?" Marshal Thompson urged his horse forward. "Because Judge Carter's in Denver, and Judge Williams wouldn't sign an eviction without cause." Blake's face reddened. "Judge Hawkins from Silver Creek." "Hawkins isn't a territorial judge," the marshal said mildly. "He's a county magistrate with no authority over land disputes. You've been sold bad paper, Blake." "Nevertheless," Blake began. "Nevertheless, nothing." Cole emerged from the cabin, Eleanor beside him. "You want this land? We both know it's not about papers. It's about water rights and gold access. So let's stop pretending this is civilized business." Blake dismounted slowly, his hand hovering near his gun. "You're right, so here's my final offer. Take the money and leave. Or what?" Eleanor stepped forward. "You'll murder us like you murdered those miners in California." Blake went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "James Morrison, Peter Chen, Miguel Reyes." Cole recited the names slowly. "Died when the Happy Fortune mine shaft collapsed. The mine you swore was safe. The mine that never had an ounce of gold in it." "You can't prove—" "Actually, he can—" A new voice spoke from the crowd. A thin man in spectacles pushed forward. "Herbert Fleming, attorney at law, Mr. Maddox contacted me 3 weeks ago. I've been investigating your past. Mr. Blake, or should I say, Mr. Harrison Blackwood." Blake's hand went for his gun, but froze as 20 rifles swung toward him. His own men backed their horses away, suddenly unwilling to die for their employer's schemes. "Here's what's going to happen," Cole said conversationally. "You're going to withdraw any claim to this land. You're going to leave this valley and never return. And you're going to do it now." "Or," Blake snarled, "or Mr. Fleming here files papers in every newspaper from here to San Francisco about your real identity. Or Marshal Thompson arrests you for fraud and murder. Or—" Cole smiled coldly. "You and I settle this the old way. Just you and me. Winner takes all." Blake looked around at the assembled crowd, at his own men who wouldn't meet his eyes, at Eleanor standing steady with her pistol ready. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "This isn't over," he said weakly. "Yes, it is." Eleanor's voice rang clear. "Because if you come back, if you send anyone after us, if you so much as whisper our names in connection with trouble, the whole territory will know what you did. Mr. Fleming has copies of everything. So do we. So does the marshal. Your choice, Mr. Blackwood. Leave with your reputation damaged, or leave with it destroyed." Blake climbed back on his horse without another word. As he turned to go, Eleanor called out one more time, "Mr. Blake, this land was bought with love and built with hope. It's defended by community and protected by truth. You never stood a chance." The crowd parted to let Blake and his men through. They rode away in silence, and Eleanor knew that they wouldn't be back. Men like Blake relied on isolation and fear. Against unity and courage, they had no power. As the dust settled, the crowd erupted in celebration. Neighbors Eleanor barely knew clapped Cole on the back, congratulated them both, shared stories of their own struggles with land grabbers and profiteers. "Well done, both of you," Marshal Thompson said, shaking Cole's hand. "Been wanting something solid on Blake for months. This'll help clean up the whole territory." "Just protecting what's ours," Cole replied. "No, you did more than that." The marshal looked around at the gathered crowd. "You showed folks what's possible when we stand together. That's worth more than gold." The celebration lasted into the afternoon. Tables appeared from wagons, laden with food. Someone brought out a fiddle. Children played in the garden Eleanor had planted while adults danced on the packed earth. As the sun began to sink, Tom Garrett raised a toast. "To the Maddoxes, for showing us that a home isn't just walls and a roof, it's the people who'll fight beside you." The crowd cheered, and Eleanor felt tears roll down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness or fear, but of joy, of belonging. Later, as their neighbors finally departed with promises to help with the harvest and plans for a proper barn raising, Cole and Eleanor stood alone in their yard. The cabin's shadow stretched long across the ground Sophie's roses had claimed. "We did it," Eleanor said softly. "We did," Cole agreed. He pulled her close. "That was some speech you gave Blake. Where'd that come from?" "From knowing who I am now, from understanding what we've built." She gestured at their home, their land, the community that had rallied around them. "My father thought I was worthless because I couldn't give him grandchildren. Blake thought we were weak because we were just two people alone. They were both wrong." "How do you figure?" "Because worth isn't measured in what you produce for others. It's measured in what you choose to create for yourself. And strength," she smiled. "Strength isn't in numbers or guns. It's in connection, in choosing to help when you could turn away, in building something bigger than yourself." Cole kissed her forehead. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between that saloon in Redemption Creek and today." She paused. "Cole, what the widow Martinez said about us helping when her cow was sick, I don't remember you telling me about that." He shrugged. "Wasn't worth mentioning, just neighbors helping neighbors." "That's exactly why it was worth mentioning." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him fully. "You've been building this community all along, haven't you? Every small kindness, every offered hand, you were weaving us into something larger." "We were," Cole corrected. "Every meal you shared, every time you sat with someone who needed company, every smile at the trading post, we both built this." Eleanor looked at their cabin, golden in the setting sun. The walls were complete now, the roof solid, the garden growing green and promising. But more than that, it was surrounded by invisible threads of connection, of mutual aid, of chosen family. "Sophie would be proud," Eleanor said softly. "I think she is," Cole replied. "I think she knew, somehow, that this place needed more than just two people's love. It needed a community's strength. And now it has it." They went inside as darkness fell, the cabin warm and welcoming. Eleanor lit the lamps while Cole built up the fire. Simple domestic tasks, but weighted with meaning after the day's victory. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked as they prepared their evening meal together. "Now we live," Cole said simply. "We finish the harvest. We help raise the Johnsons' new barn. We teach the Martinez boys to read better. We make this valley a place where folks like Blake can't get a foothold. And us," Cole smiled, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. "Well, there's still that circuit preacher coming through next month." Eleanor opened the box to find a simple gold band. Nothing fancy, but perfect in its plainness. "Cole, it's not much." "It's everything," Eleanor interrupted. "It's choice, it's partnership, it's home." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. "I love you, Eleanor Hayes, soon to be Maddox." Cole said, "Thank you for choosing to build this life with me." "I love you too, Cole Maddox, Thank you for showing me I was worth choosing. As they held each other in their complete cabin, their growing garden just outside, their community spread through the valley like a protective net. Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a dusty saloon where she'd been for sale to this moment of perfect freedom and belonging. Her father had been wrong. She wasn't worthless because she couldn't bear children. She'd borne something else: community, strength, a new life built on choice and mutual respect. She'd created a different kind of family, one bound by shared struggle and common purpose rather than blood. The cabin was quiet except for the crackling fire and the distant howl of coyotes. But it wasn't the threatening sound it had been on those first nights. Now it was just part of the tapestry of their life, wild and free and chosen. "Tomorrow," Eleanor murmured against Cole's chest, "I want to plant more roses. For Sophie, for us, for everyone who helped us today." "Impractical roses in the wilderness," Cole teased gently. "The most impractical roses we can find," Eleanor confirmed. "To remind us that beautiful, impractical things have value, that choosing beauty in a hard place is its own kind of strength." "Then we'll plant roses," Cole agreed. "And vegetables, and maybe an apple tree, and whatever else you want to grow in this life we're building." Eleanor smiled, thinking of all the seasons ahead, all the choices yet to make, all the life yet to live. She'd started this journey as property, but she was ending it as partner. Started it alone, ending it surrounded by community. Started it believing she was worthless, ending it knowing her infinite worth. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. In the morning, they'd plant roses, they'd help their neighbors. They'd continue building not just a homestead, but a place where everyone could choose their own path, defend their own dreams, create their own worth. But tonight, they held each other in their hand-built home and knew that everything they'd fought for had been worth it. Every struggle, every fear faced down, every choice made despite the risk. They were home, they were free, they were magnificently, completely, perfectly alive. And in the wild heart of the frontier, that was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Eleanor and Cole's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of love, courage, and community in the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories that capture the heart and spirit of the frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means the world and helps bring these tales of the American West to life. Until next time, partners.